Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th episode of The Knowledge Nest. As you know, if you've watched the last few episodes of The Knowledge Nest, I am working over the past few weeks on creating policies and procedures for the archives of the College of Southern Idaho. And one of the focuses I had last week was the creation of a metadata policy and procedures manual. And I thought, why not share this with everyone so they know exactly what metadata is? And then next week, I'm going to share with you how you can use knowledge of this metadata to help you in your research and in your searching for materials at the library and in other places in your life as well. So, especially if you've taken a data class or a library science class, or maybe even some photography classes or file creating or computer science classes, you've heard the term metadata. And it kind of is the bane of everyone's existence because no one exactly has the same definition for metadata, and so there's a lot of conflicting things. But the general definition of metadata is it's data about data. Now, metadata means that it describes where particular data points come from. Now, in scientific research and in scientific circles, data is numbers or quantitative expressions in numbers of certain occurrences or quantities or something else. And additionally, it could be qualitative descriptions, words or images. And that is a very specific form of data, and metadata describes where you get this data from. But let's take a step back, and maybe this is a more understandable description of metadata. Let's say you take a picture of an event. It was Memorial Day yesterday. Let's say you were at a barbecue. You took a picture of your family at a barbecue or a group rock climbing or hiking or something. And you have that picture. So, yes, you have the image that you took of your family or your friends doing whatever they were doing, but who was in the picture? What camera was using to take the picture? What name would you give the picture? What file name would you give the picture? How many bytes does that picture take up? What's the storage requirements for it? How can you render or view that picture? All of these facets of that picture are described in what's called metadata. And so everything you produce, create, this video has metadata. If I wanted to bore you out of your minds, I could recite the metadata that I'm going to give this video, but I will not do that. You just have to understand that metadata is the information necessary to place an object, or in the context of archives, a document or a folder, in the context of its companion units, their series in a collection, the collection as a whole, and the whole group. So if we're talking about, say, a library book, this book is a fiction book. It deals in science fiction. It is part of the science fiction category in the Dewey Decimal System or the Library of Congress, and it's one of a certain number of this type of books in a specific library. And so the metadata of individual items can provide context to other items and to the emphases or the strengths of a particular library or a group. Or let's even go to the grocery store. Every single food item has a metadata associated with it. The barcode that you are scanning has been assigned by the store, and there are other markings, there are other serial numbers for refrigerators, filing cabinets, all sorts of things. Shipping, if you've ever looked at shipping, Amazon, if you've gotten an Amazon package, there are dozens, potentially, maybe a dozen, if not more, specific metadata entries, fields related to that item. So when let's go. So when someone creates metadata, especially in the context of libraries and archives, you want to avoid the use of abbreviations, capitalize all proper names, don't use unknown or anonymous, leave metadata fields blank, and create accurate and consistent entries for subjects and descriptions. And be thorough in your descriptions and describe it in general terms. Why is that important? In research, you'll find out later. So, and that by later I mean next week, we're going to use all of these facets of metadata production to search for items in libraries and in other places that is so you can find them really quickly, and you can also connect different items that are related to the same topic. One specific type of metadata or facet of metadata is the idea of controlled vocabularies. So when I talked about the science fiction genre, when I was talking about the library book and it was classified in the science fiction genre, there's a controlled vocabulary term that is only used for books of the science fiction genre. And then if you go to specific authors, then you would have a specific controlled vocabulary term for each specific author. So works of authors who have similar names or even the same name, a generation apart or something, won't get confused for each other's works. And controlled vocabularies are predetermined, and they're used to describe resources in a way that can establish consistency, and it will enable discovery by grouping related content together and clarifying the specifics of individual content. And so the three most important types of controlled vocabulary fields are those for subject terms, science fiction, creator names, authors, and place names, especially in the context of nonfiction materials or even some fiction materials that are related to specific places. Geographic names and locations have controlled vocabularies associated with them. For instance, there was a collection that I was looking at, and the geographic area is Cripple Creek, Colorado. And Cripple Creek has a specific controlled vocabulary assigned by the Library of Congress, and it's Cripple Creek, parentheses, Colorado abbreviation, COLO, period, parentheses. And that term, that controlled vocabulary, will be associated and put in the metadata of every element every document, related to that place. And yes, the Colorado abbreviation was an abbreviation, and I just said you shouldn't be using abbreviations. However, these are controlled vocabularies created to be as precise as possible by the Library of Congress, and if you have that controlled vocabulary accurate and precise, it will link to items in other repositories about that same topic. And so these are types that we kind of ignore the metadata rules in general because they're controlled vocabularies. And so what types of metadata do we use? What schemas or what systems of organizing the metadata do we use? Well, if you've ever been to a public library, or any library, really, you have used two types of classification systems. The first is called the Dewey Decimal System, and this creates call numbers for specific books based on their subject, their geographic place, their authors, etc. The second, is the Library of Congress system, and this is what we use at the College of Southern Idaho, is the Library of Congress system. In archival collections, we create our own call numbers based on format. However, we use Dublin core metadata and encoded archival description to describe the specific elements of folders and items, for instance, the titles, how much space is being used, whether it's in grayscale or black or color, or all these different types of the subjects and geographic locations. We actually use the Library of Congress authorities related to that. And so while there are differences between these, there are also very many similarities. I am in the process of creating crosswalks for multiple different schemas, connecting Dublin Core and encoded archival description, and then I'm going to create one for MARC records, which are another form of creating book descriptions. and it takes kind of the elements. And so I take those elements and I say, these elements are the same, or they mean the same thing. And so if you're looking for something in this record, an archival record, you can also look for it in the library under this thing. And this is kind of something that will help catalogers and computers. But essentially, if you're looking for a library item, and we don't have it technically, but the archives does, or another institution does, you can see, this collection deals with this topic. Maybe I don't have a book that can go to teach me about this topic, but I can go to the archives and look at this folder, and these documents may have something that will help me in my research. So our purpose as the library in general is to help you access things and research them and understand them. And so that's kind of what metadata is all about. I mentioned MARC. MARC is used to encode metadata, and the Library of Congress and Dewey Decimal Systems, they incorporate the metadata into call numbers, but the MARC system, the MARC record, is how we record those call numbers and kind of specify this is the justification for this call number. These are the subject headings. So that's kind of interesting to me and to Miranda and a little bit to Dave, but probably not to everyone else. So I will not go and belabor that point. But now you know a little bit about what metadata is and about the details of that and how you can find specifics about formats and titles and storage spaces and other things. So I would encourage you to go to your library catalog and look at kind of the metadata, look at how it's plotted out and described in the order that it's contained in the record, and we're going to use that next week when we talk about using metadata to search for items. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week on the Knowledge Nest.